welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Keith Darrow podcast. I'm super excited today to actually have what I consider a friend, a colleague, and really my mentor, my coach. I believe that every great player needs a coach. And so I'm honored to have with me today, Dr. Dustin Burleson of Burleson Orthodontics, of Burleson Seminars. The guy does everything. Not only does he make beautiful teeth, but he does amazing things in helping people to grow their business. Dr. Dustin, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, Keith, thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
So, Dustin, tell me about, you don't mind if I just call you Dustin, tell me about what you've been doing. Tell me why you do it. So you'll notice I have my little tuning fork back there, not just because I'm a geek when it comes to all things sound, but because it reminds me to ask why. Because when I look at that, I think of why. And I know you're a big proponent of start with why. So why, Dustin? Why do you do what you do? Why don't you just go to work, fix teeth, and go home at night? Why are you obsessed with coaching? And I mean, you put out more content than anybody I know about how to run a business, about how to cut through the chase of direct to consumer. So why do you do all this?
Well, first, it's fun. I actually enjoy it, but I kind of grew up in the business. So my father was a dentist. Both of my brothers are root canal specialists. And so I kind of grew up around dentistry, a lot of uncles and cousins and people that like teeth. So I guess from a young age, I thought it was interesting and I was curious about healthcare, but also in an environment where I didn't have to be on call 24/7. So thought about medical school, thought about optometry school. I don't know that I ever considered audiology, but dentistry was a good fit. And then I really got into computers at a young age. And computerized my dad's practice when I was in, I think, 8th or 9th grade, and started working in marketing. And I loved just the creation aspect of that. I've always been really into art and drawing and reading. And so just it all kind of came together. We met some people I think you probably know years ago that started building automated software at a little company called Infusionsoft, now known as Keep. Yep. And we started speaking and sharing what we were doing in dentistry. And as they say, that was, you know, the starting point of a long career and kind of coaching and teaching others what we've done. So that's the long answer. If you sit next to me on a gondola or, you know, an airplane and you ask me what I do for a living, I usually say, have you ever gotten an annoying text message from your dentist? And people go, yeah. And I said, that's probably us.
Yeah, that was this guy. I got to say, just the way I live, I don't think those text messages are annoying because I want to be reminded that my appointment's coming. I want to be asked afterwards to leave a review. So I think it's great. And really the way I look at you is the sort of inventor or creator of using automation in healthcare. I'm sure people have been doing it for a long time, but what I saw you do, what my business partner and I saw you do in orthodontics was really something completely different. We're not just talking about automating to send a case history report. We're not just talking about automating appointment reminders. What you did was you figured out how to build a relationship electronically with your patients. Because frankly, when a new patient comes in, you don't have unlimited amount of time to go through everything. And so what you really implanted into our brains was the importance of education and nurturing patients even before they walk in the door. So what was that like to go from not having a system like that to having a system like that? What did it mean for your business?
It's significant. And, I wish I was smart enough to have thought of it in advance. We came to the conclusion that was needed after a really difficult time in the business where we were doing it manually and all the employees were stressed out. We were sending birthday cards manually. We would literally line them up, hundreds at a time. And with a pencil, we would put the date, a few days before the birth date where the stamp would go. So we knew when to send them out. And it was a nightmare. People were,
that sounds painful,
until 8:00 at night. It was crazy. So we weren't smart enough to do it in advance. We really had to rethink the system as we grew because it was stressing the team out. And, you mentioned a really important point, and that's we want to build a relationship where things can be automated and consistent. no one really cares who hands them or asks them to fill out the new patient health questionnaire, but they do care that you remember their name. You took the time to listen to them and connect with them as a human being. So that automation has allowed us to connect one-on-one, face-to-face in the real world where it matters. And instead of most doctors' offices experiences where they slide the clipboard, through the glass window to you and tell you to have a seat, and then you sit in a waiting room for an hour. That's still happening today at the time of this recording, which just blows my mind. So it's helped us have a better relationship face-to-face with patients, because health history and insurance information and predeterminations and, updating things about your next appointment, that can all be done automated through a smartphone.
Yeah, I mean, that's easy stuff, but it's building that personal relationship so that the patient almost knows what you're going to say. They know who you are. They know your story. I mean, I love the story about the birthday cards, because although I didn't have an assembly line, probably because I just never would do it, but I remember handing the box to my administrators and saying, okay, here's the box of birthday cards for October. Figure it out. And sometimes I would find that box a month or two later where it didn't get sent out. Half of it got sent out. And I mean, could I really yell at somebody who I pay to be a patient experience coordinator to help my patients feel more comfortable, more welcoming in the in-person environment, that I tried to drag them away and fill out birthday cards? I mean, it's incredible what happens out there. And you're right that there's still so many practices that don't do these things, or maybe they're doing it manually. I mean, we'll consider that good, but there is a better and a best on that scale.
Yeah, I mean, the communication between consumers and care providers or any service or goods providers is such a critical component, because everyone's so busy, right? And no one wakes up going, oh, I wonder what the dentist is up to today. I hope Dr. Burleson's having a good day. They don't care, but they do want to have a relationship to the extent that they need to get what they need from us. And, those systems have helped us do that, where, I think it matters. I think it matters that someone knows that I'm really into cleft lip and palate care, that I enjoy sailing, that this is why I do what I do with Smiles Change Lives. Not to where it has to be all encompassing, but that they have a bit of a relationship with the person who's giving them care. It humanizes it and makes it a lot less transactional, which I think that there's a real struggle, and at least in the United States, with healthcare between, this ultra efficiency and systems-based care that can be scaled, which is really hard to do, and the individual and the relationship. And, clearly these software programs that we've built have helped that. It's really, you ask, what difference has it made? Every metric and every key performance indicator in the business has gotten better as a result of the consistency in the communication, the relationship. So new patients go up, conversion and referrals go up, compliance goes up, quality of outcomes go up, because it is really hard to do those things at scale consistently. So what has intrigued me, and the reason I wanted you on here, because I think, if I had to guess, over 95 probably % of people that are listening to this podcast, they're in hearing healthcare. And so I want to make sure that they understand why Dr. Dustin Burleson, the orthodontist, the guy who does teeth, not ears, the guy who works with braces, not hearing aids, why is he on this episode? And I want to explain to the listener why. So what I believe Dustin has done, and I want you to elaborate this on, I don't know if you did it intentionally or by accident, but we all know about direct-to-consumer braces. We all know about direct-to-consumer Smile Better clubs, Smile Direct clubs, whatever they're called. And so at least I think your motivation was, well, I got to get out ahead of this. I have to let people know that we provide a service. So what has that direct-to-consumer been like for you? Because in hearing healthcare, as you know, we've talked about it a number of times, over-the-counter hearing aids have now, just recently, now they have the stamp of approval from the FDA, from legislation. They're now available everywhere. Big box stores, retail pharmacies, the big blue electronic stores. And a lot of people in my field are freaking out. I just saw one in a holiday catalog that was in the stack of mail today. There's a little ad, which is probably co-op advertised in this holiday gift catalog for
Sure.
I'm not sure what they called it, but a hearing amplified device or something, probably to get around the
so my guess is, just to clarify that, when that ad went out, my guess is the legislation wasn't passed. So maybe they used the word amplifier, but if they could redo that ad today, it would now say FDA approved over-the-counter hearing aid. Like the same stuff that we're working with sometimes, not always, but
yeah. So, I mean, we did see this ahead of time. We saw it years ago with pharmaceuticals going direct to consumer and bypassing the primary care provider. We thought that's really interesting and different and odd. And now we all take for granted that nonstop on television, you see advertisements for pharmaceuticals, where years ago that was not allowed and very much would have been frowned upon. So, not here to debate what's right and what's wrong for the consumer. I have strong opinions on what I think is best for the consumer and the individual autonomy between that provider and the consumer, the patient. But, the democratization of everything increases the access and lowers the price. And we saw that coming in dentistry with several direct-to-consumer aligner companies. We've seen it with our clients in optometry with Warby Parker, and retailers have seen it across the board. So, I mean, the gatekeepers, the incumbents are being disrupted by technology. What years ago, I still joke, a taxi cab operator years ago would say, wait, a stranger is going to show up to your door and pick you up and take you for a ride, and you're going to pay that. That's hitchhiking, right? So
right.
You're going to stay at a stranger's house that doesn't have functioning smoke detectors and, might have a criminal history. Now that's called Airbnb.
Cameras.
So,
yeah, right.
We can debate the right versus wrong of all this, but the consumer has the final say, and consumers across the board have said, we're comfortable straightening our teeth at home.
Well, that's just it. So I don't want to, we'll come back, but what I love your point, which is right or wrong, it doesn't really matter. What our government has said, for better or worse, is that in order to increase access, we have to break down some of the barriers. We have to break down that level of entry to get straight teeth, to get better hearing, to get a hotel that's more affordable. Like, they've just broken all those barriers down, and it's opened the floodgate. And it's definitely had an impact on people who have built the business based on it, who've, trained, went to school for it. But if you're ready for it, and I think if anything, it helps you to really differentiate your services and your value from whatever product it is, glasses, braces, hearing aids. So
you're absolutely right. And so what we've found now is that we've had 5 or 6 years of solid data from these direct-to-consumer companies. And at the time of this interview, Smile Direct Club, for example, is really being hammered in the stock market and missing quarterly earnings, and they have some customer service issues. Warby Parker, within 4 years of saying we'll never need to have physical stores, totally changed their model and started building. I think they have, at the time of this recording, over 190 some odd physical locations, same with Smile Direct Club. So what we found is that the good news is for service providers is, hey, is this the brave new world we're in where no one's going to come see us or all going to buy hearing aids through some cheap competitor? The answer is a clear and resounding no. And that there's only a small segment of the population who's willing to forego the loss of functionality that presents in the supply chain for all of these firms. So at a certain point, when the aligner doesn't fit for our patients, or the hearing aid needs adjusted, or they have a question, consumers want to be able to interact with an expert. And the direct-to-consumer companies have found, Warby Parker being a great example, that at first they said, to measure the interpupillary distance, just hold up a credit card and we'll get it. Take a picture of yourself, hold up a credit card. And people like you and I are going, no, I want to go see I'm not holding up a credit card and hoping you guess correctly on the interpupillary distance. So these eyeglasses.
Well, how about an online hearing test? I mean,
oh my God,
you can just turn down the volume or turn up the volume and pass it.
But I'm not just specifically inconvenient to patients who you and I are willing to pay to get it right, but also potentially dangerous to their hearing, to their vision, in my world, to their teeth, to their gums, to their bones. So, I mean, we see new things on the horizon and we either go, okay, that's never going to impact us, or, oh my gosh, the world is changing. We all have to change overnight to meet this new model. And to your point, You don't. And so there are things we need to pay attention to as opportunities and as threats to the way we do what we do for consumers. And we have an obligation to do what's best for the patient. Publicly traded companies have an obligation to drive revenue for shareholders. That's a very different kind of oath.
Yeah, it's wildly different. I mean, there's a lot of people in my field, and I'm sure you experience, they're mad. They're mad as hell at the manufacturers who, supposedly had our back all these years, but now they're going to sell direct to consumer. If I were the president of that manufacturing company, I would do the same thing. There are 42 million people. I don't know what your number is, but there are 42 million people who live with untreated hearing loss. And as far as I'm concerned, I look in the mirror every day and say, that's my fault. And when I say me, I mean collectively, that's hearing healthcare's fault that we were put in this position of, we got to help more people. Everybody says it's too expensive, so we'll lower the cost and go direct to consumer.
Yeah. And so the same thing in our industry is that, 68% of adults are not regularly seeing the dentist. A huge portion of them do not have dental insurance. Of the proportion of patients that are on Medicaid, almost 3/4 of them have lost a tooth. Almost a quarter of them have lost all of their teeth, and they can't find a care provider to help. So, we tend to agree that there are more people that can be helped and served through increased access. And if this is one component of that conversation, then we want to be at that table having the conversation with regulators, with industry leaders, and with the people who are making policy decisions on how this will all be paid for. But to, just to across the board resist new technology that'll come in and help increase access to care, I think is a mistake. And so, we want to be looking and searching for new ways to do that. But, we're not averse to new ways of doing things. A great leader, hedge fund creator, and author, Ray Dalio, I'm sure you've read his book, Principles, says new ways of doing things always replace old ways of doing things. And, in our industry, there's a lot of people swimming against the current, swimming against the wave of change, including the American Association of Orthodontists, the American Dental Association, who effectively shut down Medicaid expansion in the 1960s. They just did it again, although I think the Democrats shot themselves in the foot with trying to get expansion of everything too fast, too quickly. But dentists were across the board resistant upon a $260 billion expansion of something that would have helped a lot of people and helped a lot of dentists had they had the courage to figure out how to engage with that market and with that audience. So, we want to be cognizant of our responsibility as healthcare providers, but aware of what's on the horizon so that we can marry the best of both worlds. And I think there's certainly a way to do that. And the point I think you're making is if we won't, someone else will. And I think it's better if we're at the table.
And what was thinking about what you went through? Because I like what you said. At the time of this recording, we are less than 1 month. We're less than 30 days from the federal legislation passing. So we're really brand new to this. You're 5 to 6 years out. I mean, do you have 1, 2, maybe top 3 things that practices in hearing healthcare can learn from direct to consumer braces that you experienced? I mean, we've been having this discussion. You and I have been having this discussion for 4 years. We're ready for it. I'm completely embracing. I think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, because now I get to focus on what I do. I don't even want to talk about the widget anymore. I want to talk about the service and the value I provide. So what are your top 3 lessons, good or bad?
It's a great question. We could spend a whole weekend seminar digging into these, and it's really, we've learned some really important things. Number one is to, look to data and to not try to have confirmation or to never accept confirmation bias in things that'll be a knee-jerk reaction. So a very prime example in dentistry is that we jumped on this. I thought that makes sense. Logically, that makes sense. We didn't have any data. Yep. So what happened when direct-to-consumer aligners came along and said, hey, if you've been paying the orthodontist $6,000, we can do this for $1,800 and you'll save a lot of money and you won't have to go see the dentist every 6 weeks. But all these great things are going to happen for you. And we thought in our minds as dentists, well, those patients are probably not good consumers for us anyways. Those patients would probably never come see us anyways. So we're probably not really competing. We were wrong. So it was a great study done by University of Pennsylvania and the Wharton Business School and their dental school teamed up and went through and looked for every possible tag on social media of consumers who had been through direct-to-consumer through Smile Care Club at that time, which is now Smile Direct, or Candid Co. or Grin, or there's a million of these competitors now. And what they did is they surveyed them and said, pretty in depth, did you go see a dentist or an orthodontist before you made this decision? Why did you choose to do direct-to-consumer versus in office? And 47% of those patients actually did visit a dentist or an orthodontist before they made the decision. So these weren't consumers that were averse to seeing a dentist. These were consumers that didn't have dental health care insurance.
So what I hear you saying is applicable to my field, because I've heard a lot of people say this. It's fine. There'll always be people who shop at Walmart. I don't have to worry about it or think about it. And you just told me that's not true.
In dentistry, it's not true. So we'll see some data that come out of audiology as well. I mean, clearly there are consumers who have the means and the desire to invest in elective healthcare, and who will do so at a discount, even bypassing if they've already seen an audiologist. So, what we can learn from that is that often it wasn't price. Consumers were willing to spend more. It was often convenience. So coming back every 6 weeks, or the fear of coming to a dental office, the fear of coming to a medical provider, is often enough to dissuade consumers. Doing things through a smartphone at home, it's pretty easy. That's a pretty low barrier to entry. And by the way, no one shows up and asks you to make their interaction with you more difficult. Everyone's going to show up and say, can you do it quicker, cheaper, better?
Sure, of course.
Right, faster. Yeah. Everyone's asking for that. So we want to be cognizant of who's showing up and asking what. So number one was we miscalculated the target audience. What we're finding in a lot of these direct-to-consumer companies, a great new report published recently through the Harvard Business Review, showing, looking back now over many years of Allbirds and Warby Parker and Casper mattresses, is that a lot of these companies back themselves into a unique selling proposition or a market differentiator that they didn't quite understand. And I think Smile Direct is there right now, where they thought they would be getting affluent suburban soccer moms who wanted to be retreated without going to see the orthodontist if a few teeth had shifted. Is they're really treating a lot of lower socioeconomic status millennials and younger patients, which is not right or wrong. They just didn't know that going into it.
Yeah, they didn't. And what I think you're just being polite not saying is people who don't pay their bill to the end, people who don't necessarily care when they're 21 if they have bad credit. So I think that's what you're kind of hinting around.
So the neat thing now that Smile Direct is a publicly traded company is you can actually see the data where years before when they were privately held, we were guessing. But I mean, their bad debt runs about 11%, which is 5 points higher than traditional consumer debt, which is usually about 6% bad debt. So they do have a little bit of a collections problem, but they really have a targeting problem and acquisition cost problem in that they're finding people that are not going to listen to a celebrity on a television ad or listen to a radio ad or pick up a newspaper. They're targeting consumers who are scrolling through Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And those acquisition costs have gone up dramatically.
Oh, skyrocket.
The last 2 quarters, Smile Direct has listed that as a headwind in their business. So, so a couple of things we learned. Number one is that we miscalculated who the consumers were. Smile Direct. Now, these are positives if you can look, past one layer of the onion.
Definitely. Yep.
Right. The Smile Direct consumer who came to an orthodontist and said, no thanks, could be cost, was also convenient. So maybe being more convenient, more available, having more teledentistry options, and meeting the consumer. Maybe they don't have to come see us every 6 weeks. Maybe they can come see us every 12 weeks or every 16 weeks. So the convenience aspect was one. And maybe we shouldn't really applicable to your members and to people who are listening and doing things the way, I think the right way to do them is that these institutions who are ultimately going to be publicly traded or already are going to spend $30 to $40 million a year on direct-to-consumer advertising. That's a rising tide that lifts all ships. And so it helps me as an individual practitioner when a large company advertises on radio, television, live events, in the mail. I mean, Smile Direct is kind of everywhere. They're sponsoring arenas, they're sponsoring live events, they've got influencers. When you're promoting a message that straight, healthy teeth are good and a confident smile can help you or your child, that helps everyone. So, we welcome the spotlight that shines on our industry shines for everyone. And we've seen that with dental implant companies and large DSOs, which are kind of large group practices that have done the same thing. They come into a new market, the small dentists get nervous and they realize, oh, wow, this dental implant company just spent $20 million advertising what we do as dentists, and that helped everyone. So there are more than enough patients to go around. And if we're listening to what they want from us and paying attention to what these direct-to-consumer companies are doing but unable to do, that solo practitioners or large groups can provide, then I think there's room for everyone in this market, and consumers will pick and choose who they want to go to, and you can be as successful as you want to be without fearing change on the horizon.
Yeah, well, and I love that example that you keep going with, which is the convenience factor. I have to, every time I want my kids to go to a dentist, I got to take them out of school. My dentist only sees patients from 9 to 3. That's when my kid's in school. What about Saturday morning before sports? What about the afternoon? So I know you did this, but what was that like, having to adjust when you say more convenient? Or were you always more convenient, but perhaps it wasn't the message you led with?
It's exactly right. So we were always convenient because I grew up in a family that has a workaholic tendency. And so I've always worked late. I've always worked Saturdays. And by the way, consumers tend to reward us for that. So Saturdays by far and away are our most productive days. Parents are the happiest. There's the longest waiting list to get in on a Saturday. Same with evening appointments. So we weren't smart enough to lead with that as our unique selling proposition, which is essentially, hey, you can get braces or Invisalign without missing work or school, guaranteed, in our clinics. And we discovered that parents really like that, and then we led with it. So we kind of backed ourselves into a little bit of a market differentiator as well. And that's just a consequence of where we are. So we're in not a huge city, but we're in a mid-tier city that has still too many orthodontists for the population. Sure. We're not in a small town, in a small market where essentially you can be open 9 to 3 and still do well, or have an affinity with a small group of people where that works. So, what I would advise your listeners is to be more intentional about their position, unlike a lot of these direct-to-consumer companies where they haven't had the ability. And in fact, part of the way they launch is intentionally to bypass some of these steps. They don't want to take the time to study the market and to then define the niche they're going to go after and tailor the message, because that takes years. And what they want to do is get as many people buying hearing aids from them as they can, and then to figure out where the pieces fall. So my prediction would be that they will go through a lot of the same learning blocks and stumbling steps that Smile Direct and other firms have been through, because they haven't been intentional about the segment of the market they serve. So that's now the opportunity for your members, is to be intentional about the market they serve, so that, most of your members probably don't need any more than every, 2,000-3,000 people in their market to pay attention.
Of course. Yeah, that's it. There's, like you said, there's plenty of consumers out there, even though and I'm sure you do too, right? We hate to say consumers, but at the end of the day, they're patients who do have to consume something. So whatever you want to call it, it is what it is. You are running a business. There is a financial transaction that must take place. What did you learn in terms of, did you ever even have the thought of, we're not going to make it, or I should sell to one of the big conglomerates, I should lower my prices, right? Because I know that's what my industry is going through right now of, you know what, it's been fun for 20 years, I'm going to close shop. Or manufacturers are now buying up any practice that raises their hand, or I should say raises the white flag, they buy them out. Or, what was that like for you?
Yeah, all of the above. And I had this conversation with Seth Godin, who we interviewed on our podcast. And he said, in terms of lowering prices, he said the problem with the race to the bottom is you might win. And, that is so easy to just lower prices. And listen, there is a sweet spot, in any economic, 101 course, you're going to learn, the difference between price and volume, and it intersects at a sweet spot where if you do lower price a little bit, you will increase volume, but at what sacrifice? And what we've learned in healthcare, and just particularly in trying to grow a successful practice, is it's really dangerous to whittle away at the margin, because it results in a reduction of the customer service you can provide. So, you start sacrificing who you hire, and you start sacrificing, the refurbishment of equipment and the purchasing of excellent quality materials. And, when you start to do that, I think you're on a slippery slope. And so we did, to answer your question, look at price reduction. We looked at, how are we going to compete in this marketplace? So are we going to chase them down this rabbit hole? Should we offer a similar competing service where we could deliver clear aligners through the mail to consumers at a lower price? Every orthodontist has attempted this. At scale, it works. And in small quantities, it doesn't. So, what we decided instead was to double down on what people really want from us. And that, in my market, is the convenience of not having to pull your kids out of school every 6 to 8 weeks to get them to the orthodontist.
Yes, but respectfully, you don't have to pull them out of school for Smile Direct Club either.
Great point. Yeah, great point. That's so, when we talk to consumers, we're probably one of the few that actually sits down and says, hey, here are your options, including you could do this at home. I feel like that's my responsibility as a healthcare provider to say, you could, any healthcare provider, you're having abdominal pain. Well, you could go to the CVS Minute Clinic and they might just prescribe you something and you might be fine. Or you might need to get into the OR, or you might need to go to Mayo Clinic and get a second opinion. So, we do tell consumers that, your case is simple enough. You could do this at home with clear aligners through any of a handful of direct-to-consumer companies. And here's the pros and cons of those options. So, I will say you're right. And the parents that are hiring us are not just hiring us for the ability to not miss work or school, but they want the expert who, if something doesn't go quite right. A lot of our kids are complicated, impacted teeth, cleft lip and palate, surgical. You're just not going to do those through the mail currently. So,
I think what I hear you saying is you found a message that resonated, which was the convenience, but it was the convenient access to an expert.
To an expert, yeah.
It's that need for an expert, that desire for an expert, because I know at least 2 of my kids are going to need braces. I told you I'm coming out to you. I won't go local. I don't care. But the thought of saying to my, now 12-year-old, we'll just, we'll go online and we'll get you braces. It's just craziness.
Yeah, to you and I, and to a lot of consumers, I still think there are a segment of any population that'll go, you know what, let's give it a try. We don't have any insurance. The perceived cost barrier will be prohibitive, but in any hands and in any consumer's mind of making a decision between doing something and choosing an elective healthcare provider or doing nothing, we often err on the side as providers of assuming that everyone is going to do the right thing, come to a board certified specialist. And, why would you ever consider doing that?
We think we open our door. We get our education. We pay a lot of money for it. We rent out a building, put our name on it, and we think, why wouldn't they come? That's not the way it works.
It's always worked.
So let me ask you two other questions. So you've said 2 things that have really piqued my interest. One of them is the perceived benefit analysis. I want to come back to that, but I know in hearing healthcare, every time I talk to a client or somebody, everybody's saying, I'm thinking about providing servicing of over-the-counter hearing aids in hopes that when I get them in, I can convince them otherwise. So I would imagine Dustin and his team sat down at some point, if you're even allowed to, did you consider servicing people who buy things from the internet or, a lower price product?
Yeah, and Smile Direct and other competitors have, and this is all public knowledge. I used to be an ELP for them years ago when they were Smile Care Club. They'll actually partner with dentists and park an office inside of your office. They attempted this at CVS Minute Clinics, and I think they still have a partnership with CVS, just now owned by Aetna. So they will come and bring their patients to you and pay you $50 to do a scan of one of their patients, which I don't know if anyone knows the math on running a dental clinic, but $50 probably not going to cover the
no. Same thing, and it's crazy. Same thing in hearing healthcare. Our average cost per patient or average cost per treatment is really not that different. Yep. And although our cost of goods are more, but the $50 is not going to do anything for anybody.
Yeah, but they're trying to convince providers. Well, these patients will need other services as well, and so you see this with companies that particularly like specifically target women, for example. So Lululemon for many years has been doing very, very well, and they think their next $1 billion of growth is going to come in menswear, which I like Lululemon stuff. It's nice, but I mean, they'll have to figure out that retail shopping experience first, because it's very awkward for me as a man to go and to try on a pair of pants in the same waiting area where women are trying on yoga pants and sports bras.
I'm really, this is tough one, because I'm picturing you in the tight black Lululemon pants, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this one out of my head.
It's a horrible image. I'm so sorry. But, but the bean counters at Lululemon have convinced them you're leaving 50% of the market on the table because you're not targeting men as well. And this dumb decision is, and it's fine to go, but they should be under a separate brand or a different store, or at least figure out, the messaging, because, in one area they're doing very well, and the other they're still struggling to grow that side of the business. So everyone as a business owner is tempted to say, well, what could we go and could we find a way in this example to service people who bought online, have them come in and service? And that's, that's Nordstrom saying, hey, could we find a way to do the refund processing for Walmart on their lowest price guarantee? Or Walmart saying, could we find a way to put a gentleman in a tuxedo playing a piano in the lobby for the holidays, just for the enjoyment of the customers? It's the Ritz-Carlton saying, should we get rid of the golf course and charge $29 a night for a room? And the Motel 6 saying, should we add a golf course and charge $600 a night for a room? It's incongruent with the messaging to the market. And that's where companies get lost. And the danger in doing that is revenue management, cash flow gets shot in the foot, margin gets eaten. And you're trying to do two things that should not be married. You're trying to provide high-end service and customer value at the same time as the lowest possible price. And no one's ever made that work. The companies that do it well, that have good customer service and low cost, have streamlined everything right down the middle. Southwest Airlines leaps to mind. Low price, good service, but they've streamlined everything. We fly one type of plane and we only fly these routes, and there's no first class, and you just get on the plane and we herd you in there like cattle, but we do it friendly. And you don't even know where you're going to sit. We have fewer employees that we can pay more that are happy running this system. And, there's clearly a model to be made there. But again, the incongruency, particularly in the private healthcare field, where a lot of our revenue goes in your world to quality goods and human capital, that's a very dangerous proposition to make.
Human capital. Love that one. So the other one is the perceived cost benefit. We have a value proposition. The field of hearing healthcare believes it has a value proposition problem. I don't believe. I believe we should double our costs. But you made the point, and I've skimmed the economic books, and I know that there is a sweet spot where, yes, I'm sure you believe deep down you probably could charge twice as much, but at what, you'd cut off one arm for the other. So it's not worth it. There is a sweet spot where you can make money, people can afford it, and everybody's happy. But braces, right? The reason I never got braces was because it wasn't a perceived value in my house. For some reason, it was a perceived value for my sister. Maybe her teeth were more messed up, or maybe it was she has to be and she is a beautiful woman with nice teeth, and who gives a, rat's butt about what Keith looks like, right? I don't know what that decision was. Maybe I'll ask my mother. But the point is it just, I wish I had them when I was younger, and I still think about it often. But how do you get people to overcome that price? What is your strategy when it comes to that?
Because we have that in every industry, particularly in elective healthcare, where the provider feels like, they're stretched between these competing forces of want to charge what I feel like I'm worth, but I also don't want to be undersold by competitors. And, in the pricing model, Most of us are not in the three ways to set a price. Most of us are not in the first way, which Tesla for a while, Apple still has this with some devices, which is essentially what the market will bear. So, you can go to a small town and be the only dermatologist for 300 miles, and price is irrelevant because the alternative is driving, 6 hours in that direction to the next specialist. Most of us are not in those markets, so we'll exclude that first way. And in the middle, where most of us live, is value-based pricing. Now, that doesn't mean low price. Walmart has monkeyed with the word value. So don't think low price, meaning value-based. But value-based is where a consumer goes, I feel like whatever the cost was, Lexus is in this example, Volkswagen or Toyota or BMW is in this example. Now, Bentley and Ferrari are in the what the market will bear category. A certain Ferrari fan is going to pay whatever it takes to get the next newest model of Ferrari. Price is almost irrelevant. But in the middle, for the value-based consumer, even at a BMW or a Mercedes, would say, for what I'm giving you, which is more than I would spend for a Chevy or for a Kia.
Sure.
It's worth it. The value is commensurate with the level of time, energy, or money I'm expending for it. And then the third option is low cost. And that is, we're going to just be the low cost provider. So think of commodities, rice, sugar, soybeans, coffee, things like that. And so,
which is what Walmart has done. But I love I guess I hadn't thought about that. They just screwed with everybody's head and they called it a value.
Yeah.
Right. I want to, one of my things is I love Doritos. I want to spend $2.50 on a big bag of Doritos, not $5. So I'll go to Walmart and get my Doritos. Yeah. But Doritos ain't healthcare.
Yeah. And so, in the middle where most of us live, that now I think is a tremendous opportunity because a lot of the direct-to-consumer companies are trying to achieve scale. And so they will live in the low-cost model, which doesn't afford them the ability to do what a lot of consumers want, which is a little bit more time with their provider or knowing their relationship and being able to pick up the phone and text and get a doctor or a nurse practitioner or someone who can help them within an hour or two and not a week or two, like a lot of the direct-to-consumer companies that have service model issues. That value-based model is very much affords us margin so we can invest in the experience, which affords us referrals. And that's really the asset we're growing, is this list of people who pay attention to us and come back to us for our expertise. That's what's valuable. And on the other end, this just revenue pile that direct-to-consumer companies want to amass in order to sell to the next private equity firm or go public, that's a very different set of objectives. And that's why it's so important not to confuse the two. And what we saw a lot of our clients doing, and we had to steer them away from it, was chasing the direct-to-consumer companies down the rabbit hole of low price, low price, low price. Seth Godin is right. That's a race that you might win. And I don't think you want to win it, or even worse, coming second. It usually ends up in bankruptcy court. So, to get to the heart of your question, we want to make sure that, the value-based model that you're presenting to consumers is clear and obvious, and then to not be shy about it. And so be confident explaining the difference between what you do and what the alternatives are. And for us, it's a lot of risk removal. They know if something goes wrong, we stand behind the work.
That's the same thing in hearing healthcare. And I love that you and we'll wrap it up with those last two words, which is risk removal, because the big reason why people seem to stay at home and live with their untreated hearing loss is they know somebody who has a $6,000 paperweight or $6,000 worth of hearing aids sitting in their underwear drawer. And so taking that risk away of, we guarantee our services, lifetime guarantee, whatever it takes, know your value in everything you do. And I love what you said, which is tell everybody, scream from the mountaintops, this is what we do, right? And make sure it's not, I've never seen you talk about the braces, the metal, or it's about the service and the value that you provide.
Yeah, that's it. And I don't see it enough. And we see a lot of and follow a lot of audiology advertising and current trends in the market through working with you. And that's just not communicated well enough or frequently enough with a consumer that why would I choose you versus living with this hearing disability for the rest of my life or spending this money on someone else or something else? Why would I choose you? And, most companies, most practices don't have a compelling answer to that. Well, we've been here for 20 years and we've got low prices and by the way, we're board certified or whatever, come on in.
My personal favorite is we treat everybody like family.
Yeah.
That's great. But I went to the Miracle Ear down the street and they told me the same thing. Yeah. So you're still the same.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a perfect example. Look, I promised you under 30 minutes. I already broke that rule. I am, just because you and we get into this riff, and I think you said it earlier, we could go all weekend. I'm still new to the podcasting. And one of the things I said I would always do is I would end on this sort of funny, quirky note. A lot of people said to do it. So I have to ask you, I ask everybody before we go, Dr. Dustin. And by the way, if you want to learn more about his model and you want to, let's say you're in hearing healthcare and you're thinking about making a new website, like go to burlesonorthodontics.com, see what he's doing, see how he's messaging things. You can go to hearingandbraincenters.com. We learned from Dustin to simplify the message to make it compelling. But my question is, what is your favorite movie?
Of all, Shawshank Redemption, and the book as well.
Okay. All right. There you go. You were quick to answer that one. Did you just see it recently on a plane or something? Or
no, I've always loved
obvious?
That movie. So yeah, I watch a lot of movies. So yeah, it's good.
Awesome. All right. Dr. Dustin, thank you so much for your time. I genuinely appreciate you being here. I know everybody in hearing healthcare needs to hear everything you said because we're going through it, but better days are ahead. So I appreciate the uplifting message. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I had a fun time. Thank you.
Take care.